What's up?
Welcome back. Last week I took you behind the scenes of a major Hollywood motion picture that I wrote and directed. I didn't say anything, I just wanted you to walk around and experience it. This week I'm going to show you some tricks on how I did some of that stuff and how I pulled off a motion picture for only $2.5 million, which again, sounds like a lot of money, but that's just the price of a TV commercial. Hollywood would laugh at something like that. It wasn't a perfect movie, but I was able to pull off some big tricks on this. Part of the magic of the movie was the miniature models, because there was no CGI back then, so I had to build miniature models like this one here. Here's one of them. I got 4 of this type of ship still remaining. I got 1 over there in a glass case and 2 more hanging by the fireplace. The rest of them I blew up. I like blowing up stuff. What can I say? But yeah, I made hundreds of miniature models for the movie. Part of the secret of making everything work really well is storyboarding every single shot in the movie. Every single moment of the movie was storyboarded, and then I would look at each picture and figure out, now how can I pull this off as cheaply as possible? Well, if I put a piece of cardboard in the foreground, it looks like this, and a little bit of a miniature model back there, you know, it's all forced perspective. I did a lot of foreground miniatures and some glass paintings. I was one of the only people in Hollywood who actually did glass paintings. It's where you paint on a piece of glass that's in front of the camera. Like, let's say you want to have a castle on a hilltop, but there's no castle up there. So you set up a piece of glass in front of the camera, and you, as you're looking through the camera, you paint the castle on the glass. And you only have half an hour to do it because the lighting is changing every half hour pretty much. So you have to match the lighting perfectly with what the landscape is. And so you got to be able to work fairly fast. So I was able to paint a photorealistic painting within half an hour. And the camera has to be like at f/16 or f/22. So what's in front of the camera is just as in focus as the background. So you need a massive amount of light. So you can basically only do it in full bright sunlight. These are the castle stables. The only part we actually built was 3 or 4 boxes to put horses in, and it was in a parking lot. The castle and the rest of the shot is a photograph that we stuck on the glass of a miniature that we built. Now, the shots aren't perfect because we were really in a rush and I had to work really fast, but they worked. I mean, for a low-budget movie, I mean, it's okay. It gets the point across. Here's a shot of some shipwrecks out in the desert. Those are just painted on glass in front of the camera. And here's a shot of a valley of shipwrecks. Now, foreground miniatures is kind of similar, but instead of glass, you're using a miniature. It's actually 3-dimensional, and that's really cool because you can light it up so the lighting can match. So this is a foreground miniature. This is the shot where the king is giving a speech from his balcony. The actor is actually on a scissor lift 30 feet up in the air, way back there, and then the foreground miniature is closer to the camera, and it looks through the camera as if he's actually standing on the balcony. And when he slaps his hands down on the railing of the scissor lift, it looks like he's slapping his hands down on the balcony. Here's another foreground miniature. It's a cannon being pushed through a round window. From the inside perspective, the wall is real, but outside, the sky and the ships and the clouds are miniature. And from the reverse angle, the people are real, but the wall that they're pushing it through is now a foreground miniature. I think this one turned out really good. I like foreground miniatures because they look more real, because it is a real physical 3-dimensional thing that you can light up. Here's another foreground miniature. A lady on top of a tower. The real lady is 40 feet back and 30 feet up on a scissor lift. Both the miniature in front of the camera and the lady way back there need to be in focus, which means the lens needs to be at f/22, which means you need a massive amount of light. So foreground miniatures are usually shot in bright sunlight unless you have powerful lights indoors. And by the way, the clouds are not real either. They are airbrushed onto a piece of glass that was right in front of the camera, between the camera and the miniature. You obviously need the same bright light on the glass to light up the painting, otherwise if a shadow gets on the glass, you get this. This is with the glass fully illuminated, and this is with a shadow across the glass. Another example of a foreground miniature is a ship blowing up with people running around on the deck. This is a 30-foot miniature ship. Well, I don't know if 30 feet is miniature, but it's a scale model of a ship. This is something I built. It's in the foreground, and the people that seem to be walking around on the deck are way back on scaffolding in the back. Well, the foreground miniature was blown up, and it looks like the people are on the ship that's being blown up. A lot of foreground miniatures in this movie. Here's a shot of this princess looking out of her balcony. The balcony is actually just a 10-inch wall sconce that I bought at a hobby store. It's amazing what you can get away with Foreground Miniatures.
My movie has a lot of fantasy gadgets like this rotating cannon thing, which is also a foreground miniature. The actors were down below on the ground, and I was up on some scaffolding with the camera and the miniature. I think it turned out pretty good.
I love foreground miniature stuff. Obviously nowadays you can do the same thing with CGI and green screen, but back then in the early 90s there was no computers, and besides, actual physical models with a real light on them can look more real anyway.
I had fun creating this sequence where the flying ships are preparing for battle, and one guy has to go down through the bottom of the ship and climb down onto a cannon turret underneath the ship. But I particularly like the scene where he's inside the ship and he opens up the hatch and you see that they're flying above the clouds. That's just a bunch of cotton on a smoke machine, but it turned out pretty good.
We did not use green screen, but we did use front projection, which is a fascinating split screen system with a giant screen of glass beads.
You can put it over there on the table.
The princess room, the background was a front projection. If you do it right, front projection is actually better than rear projection because you don't lose light like you do with rear projection.
There's a secret corridor that leads into the throne.
Here's another front projection. We just built the little ledge that they were on, which is only like 2 feet off the ground. And the rest of it is a projection of a photograph of a miniature that we built. The Alchemy Lab was my favorite set. We had a giant front projection screen behind the set, and what you see is actually a projection of a painting I did of a cosmic spacey background. The telescope is just a large cardboard tube with 2 different sized paper paint buckets on the end. If you look closely, you can recognize the paper paint buckets. You see all those books on the shelf back there? You know what a lot of that is? It's just bits of lumber that were left over from all the construction going on. We painted it different colors and just stuck it on the shelves. We used everything. A lot of the props and miniatures are made from, what else? Foam core, hot glued together.
This piece of castle wall here is just foam core. You can lift it with one hand.
In my story, there's flying ships that fly above the clouds. We bought a truckload of cotton, fluffy cotton, and then we smoked up the room to make it even softer. I painted a lot of 40-foot sky backgrounds for this movie. I could have hired somebody, but we didn't have the money. I had to do a lot of this myself. And here's another sky painting I did for a sunset outside the king's bedroom. And you see that moon? That was used a lot of times in the movie. That's a painting of a moon I did on a round piece of foam core, and we literally just suspended it with fishing line in the air and lit it up. And here's how I figured out how to make a full-size pirate ship for very little money. I came up with this bright idea to make the basic shape of the ship with scaffolding, the different decks, because you can get scaffolding that has old wooden planks on top, so that became the decks of the ship. And then we went to a place called Resets, which used old sets from movies that you could buy and reuse, and we put the flats on one side of the ship, and for the mast of the ship we use sonotubes, which are big giant cardboard tubes they use for making concrete posts in construction. And that's what these green pillars are. These are sonotubes. These are cardboard tubes that we just painted to look like marble. That's me working on the king's bed. There was only like 4 of us that actually built most of the sets on this film. I was one of them. I'd draw a sketch and then we'd just start building it.
And here it is finished.
All right, here's the King's Throne set. That's me right there. The supports were 4x4 wood, and then I took some foam and tied a rope really tight around the foam so it pulled in on the foam, and then we spray painted a rubber coating on it and then spray painted that gold. So these posts on the throne are actually not hard, they're soft foam. The statues on top of the throne were old mannequins from a clothing store that we put some foam core wings on and spray painted gold. Luckily it was Christmas time when we started this movie, so there was a lot of Christmas ornaments available. So these cherubs were paper mache cherubs that were available from a Christmas store. And a lot of the fancy decorations that were on the ship models and a lot of the miniatures and props we were using was actually a bunch of Christmas ornaments with curly cues and fancy things that we just hot glued on everything. And here it is decorated up with the big wedding scene with white ribbons everywhere. And that was our most expensive day where we had the most amount of actors, the most amount of equipment. It was a massive day. We could only have one take on this. And look at all the backlit white ribbons we have around the throne area. Well, you know what that is? This is another insane Marcus idea because we didn't have money. That's toilet paper. We actually basically toilet papered the throne set, and we had these super hot spotlights backlighting all this toilet paper. It looked really cool, but it was a fire trap. And wouldn't you know it, that's the day the fire marshals showed up and decided to inspect everything. We were all freaking out. They would have shut the place down if they saw us using toilet paper. So I told my girlfriend at the time to distract the fire marshal and take him to the other end of the property while we got the shot real quick with our 300 actors and all our equipment and everything. Oh my God. I mean, we had people standing by with fire extinguishers and all that stuff, but I mean, when you have no money, you have to do what you have to do, and that's what we did. Speaking of toilet paper, you see this miniature of the castle wall? Guess what those round things are? Those are toilet paper rolls. We used everything. How do you outfit a whole bunch of people cheaply? Well, you see all those white outfits all those archers are wearing? I went to Walmart and bought 50 extra large white t-shirts and black gym pants and had someone spray paint the castle logo with a stencil on the shirts. And all those bows and arrows were just PVC pipes with foam core designs hot glued on them and then spray painted gold. And the arrows were just sticks. This is how I made the armor for the movie. There's a company in Michigan called Tobin's Lake. They make vacuform stuff. Vacuform is a thin sheet of plastic that's been pressed into a shape. And this is like not much thicker than paper. This is going to be a breastplate. These are going to be metal gauntlets. You start by spray painting everything flat black and wait for the paint to dry. Then you cut it out with scissors. It's really easy to cut out because it's like paper thin. Then you get this stuff called rub and buff, which is basically silver paint that you kind of lightly rub with a cloth over the raised surface areas, and you buff it so it's shiny like silver, and before you know it, you've got a nice metallic looking silver breastplate. For the gauntlets, you get some natural colored dark landscaping gloves, and you hot glue the pieces onto it, including the back of the hand and the wrist piece, and there you go. I went and bought different colorful silk scarves. I cut the scarves in half, sewed them into tubes, and then sewed those tubes onto the sleeves of cheap black t-shirts. This t-shirt then becomes the base for the armor to go on top of. Since you don't see underneath of here, all you see is the sleeves. You only make the parts that you see. The shields were just flimsy, paper-thin, vacuform plastic cutouts that were painted on one side. Again, I got those from Tobin Lake. All the white capes these heroic knights were wearing in the movie, cheap bed sheets from Walmart and Target. One of the things that castles and ships have a lot of is railings and balconies. How do you make those? Especially when they're fancy. So I had this bright idea to use plastic bird baths. I bought a whole truckload of them and painted them to look like wood or stone. I lined them all up in a row and put a board across the top, and voila, instant railings. They were used in so many places in the movie, and they looked like the real thing. The tops of the bird bath were used as wheels for the cannons, and the backs of the cannons, which were just cardboard tubes painted with a flat black and silver dry brush technique. There was a dungeon scene where I wanted a rat running across the railing. So we got a rat from a pet store, and everybody liked him so much, everybody was feeding him. So when it came time to actually shoot the scene with the rat, he was supposed to run across the railing towards some food that was waiting at the other end. Well, everybody was feeding him so much because he was so cute that he had no desire, he had no motivation to go get the food on the other end. So he just sat there, and we have all these takes of people prodding him and poking him and using, blowing a hairdryer on him, just anything to get him to run across. It was so funny. He became kind of the mascot of the set. He was so cute. All right, the big wedding scene. You see all those flag trumpets going up? Home Depot PVC pipes with plastic oil funnels spray painted gold. Now look at this rig that I built. It's a porta-jib with a camera on one end. It's all made out of wood, 2x4s and 4x4s. It can actually turn, and the base that it's on is a plywood base that has skateboard wheels under it that are running on dolly track. So this is a dolly track porta-jib that can rotate and go up and down. All made out of wood from Home Depot. And that's me filming. I had to do so much of this myself. Here's an example of expensive Hollywood stuff that just takes too long to set up. The DP we had at the time was trying to use a Panther dolly, which takes a while to program. It was just taking way too long. So I told my grip guys, pick up the damn thing, put it on my plywood dolly, and start just pushing it. So this ended up being one of the most expensive tripods. We also did some optical compositing with matte paintings I did. Here's the matte painting of the castle hall interior, and here's one of the garden outside. And here's the king's bedroom establishing shot. This upper part here, that's all just a painting, because the set didn't have a roof. Here's what the set actually looked like. So I had to paint in all that upper stuff, including the fancy top of the bed. That's just part of the painting. This painting on the wall here that the king talks to. Oh my God. All right, here's a scene of the lonely king talking to a painting of his dead wife. Well, the day before we were to shoot this, we still didn't have a painting. So I got a 4 by 8 foot sheet of plywood, and I spent the night before painting this painting myself while everybody else had already gone home. But the scene turned out pretty good. Here's another ship set being built before it was painted. You can see the birdbath bases at the top making the railing with just some wood running across the top. Here's another painting I did really quick the day before we had to shoot it. It's the desert, the overhead desert shot. In the movie, everybody ages rapidly, so the aging makeup in the film was done by the award-winning makeup artist Dave Dupuis, who started his career doing the makeup effects in Stephen King's The Stand. That was a great miniseries. Anyway, Dave and I were roommates in art school in Florida in 1980, so we go way back.
You're all godless! There's still time! I promise you wealth beyond anything you can imagine!
And he did really good work in this movie. And here's the funeral scene. See all these guys? Look at all the actors that we had to dress. Well, look at them. It's all just white t-shirts and black gym pants. And I even had to end up painting the poster for the movie because just didn't have the money. How did we get a full Philharmonic orchestra and a 100-man choir to do the soundtrack? Well, obviously not in this country. My composer went to Kiev, which is now in the news. Their orchestra and their choir was very cheap to use, and this was 1994. But yeah, we got the Kiev Philharmonic and choir to do the soundtrack. That was amazing. And then there's the horse. Oh my God, Smokey Robinson's $1 Million Horse. It's a Frisian, same type of horse that was used in Lady Hawk. This horse was super special, super expensive, and one day it breaks free and runs away down the road. Everybody was freaking out. Oh my God. So my lead actor, Tom Schultz, gets on the back of a pickup truck and they're driving down the road next to the horse. It's just like a scene out of a movie. Drive next to the horse. The horse is running down the street. Pickup truck's running next to the horse. My actor friend, who is the lead actor of my movie, if something happens to him, the movie's screwed, jumps off the back of the pickup truck onto the horse, gets the horse, and somehow it magically was all okay. It worked out fine. And there's just one thing after another on this movie. So many things happened on this movie that read the book. I mean, I can't even tell y'all. Read the book Dream Chaser, because I cover a lot of this stuff in here. And there's so many times where you go, I don't know how this thing made it. I don't know how they actually finished this movie, how they could have survived all these things that happened, but we did. I mean, and that's what typical movie making is like. There's so many emergencies and things that happen. My movie also launched a few careers. One of the more notable ones is this guy here. His name's Ted Melfi. I think my movie was the first thing he'd ever worked on. He wanted to get his Screen Actors Guild card. So I gave him one shot in the movie where he says literally 3 words so he could get his SAG card. He worked really hard, and I could tell that he took his work seriously. So I made him second AD, and he really helped a lot on the movie. Now that was 1994. 25 years went by. In 2017, he made a movie called Hidden Figures that was nominated Best Motion Picture of the Year. My Ted made it to the Academy Awards. I am so proud of him. We're like family. I mean, everybody in that set was family. It was so funny. I remember back then, he had a tiny little Ford Fiesta. It was the car the size of a shoebox. And it was so lightweight and small that the 4 guys from the grip department would go take his car. Each guy would pick up a corner of the car and they'd carry it and hide it somewhere else. And Ted would come at the end of the day and his car was missing and it would be like around the corner or something. We had so much fun back then. It was like college. Like we were just having so much. I mean, it was stressful, but at the same time, we were, doing crazy things like college kids. So yeah, I mean, if you really take your work seriously, you can make it in life. And I'm trying to give you more and more examples that just stick to your dream, take it seriously, follow through with it. Now, I get emails from people saying they want to apprentice, they want to help, they want to, but right now I'm a loner. I'm kind of burned out on the whole thing. I don't need help. I don't want people around me. I'm a recluse, but I do share my information with you, through this little peephole called YouTube. So I'm giving you what I can. One of the most important things in pulling off something like this is to get a bunch of people excited about it. Get the word out. The more people that get excited about it, the more momentum you have, the more you can use that to your advantage. For example, the animals guy. I had a scene in the movie where the princess room, little girl, I just wanted to have her have some puppies and kittens, like a princess just filled with puppies and kittens. That's what a princess room would have. So the animal guy came by and he saw what I was doing, and he saw all these people working on this movie, and they were wasn't a typical Hollywood movie. Everybody liked what they were doing. They were totally into it, and it was like a family, and he got excited. But he says, I like your dream. I see you're like a guy trying to make a dream come true. I want to help. He was at the time filming, I think it was Donnie Brasco with Al Pacino, and he had a lion with him at the time. And he says, hey, I got a lion. Why don't I bring him in and put him on the king's throne? And then next week I've got a bear. And then the week after that, I got a python and an eagle. And I won't charge you for it. Just pay for the animals' food and the trainer. And I want to pitch in. I want to help this. That was one example of all kinds of people that were pitching in on this movie. The audio post-production. We were able to pull off so much. Visual effects guys. When you get people excited about something, a project that comes from your heart, and they see that it's from the heart, you're not doing it for the money, and that you're passionate about it. It's amazing how many people get behind you, and before you know it, you have an army backing you up. So really, the most important part of pulling this off is being passionate about it, and just that you're just set on doing it. And when people see that you're committed, you're jumping off the cliff and there's no stopping you, they're going to follow you. They're going to make it happen. And that is the most, it's not the money. Don't worry about the money. Focus on your dream and your passion, and figure out, if you were the only one who was ever going to work on this, to make it, figure out how you would do it. How would you do it if you were the only one working on this? Figure it out. Pencil out every shot. Just literally, you got to figure out all the details. And then once you've got it figured out, people will see that you have it figured out. And then they're going to feel more confident that if they work for you and help you, that you could actually pull it off. They want to know that you could pull this off. So that's the most important thing. Again, it's not the money. It is you doing your homework, learning the tricks, and being confident and having passion. That's really what it's you. You are the one that's going to make it happen. So I hope this inspired you. Again, you can learn about all this in my book, Dream Chaser. You can get it at dreamchaserbook.com. This talks about behind the scenes and all the stuff that I went through to make it happen, how I overcame a bunch of trials and tribulations. If you're into filmmaking and behind the scenes, it's at dreamchaserbook.com. And I hope my channel shows you and inspires you some tricks and inspirations and stuff on how to make your dream come true. Because that's really what it's about. I mean, what's life without a dream and a purpose, right? Right. So I hope I give you some of that. I'll see you next week.